Sup everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about Venti, the one and only. Now many would say Venti's current state in the game could be what people say is a fall from grace. At one point Venti was utilized in every single team possible in the Abyss, and for good reason, right? It was mainly because the Abyss was tuned for Venti, and with now his second rerun, many have taken the liberty to come out and say, I'm skipping Venti because he's bad, right? I know it's very difficult to accept something that you may not find true. And when people say and give the blanket statement of Venti is bad, I think it's not completely true. And everything has to work in relations. There are many factors that contribute towards Venti's downfall, and it's not just because Kazuha exists, as many people would like to think so. Be like, oh, one character exists, which makes another lose value. While that is true, it's not the entire picture. So in today's video, we're going to discuss what happened to Venti, as well as whether it's worth it or not for you, whether you're a newer player, a veteran player, or someone in the middle, to pick up this character for yourself to try and build. As always, name's Erotic Walrus. Make a ton of videos here on YouTube, stream Wednesdays and Saturdays right here on YouTube on this channel. So like, subscribe, and we can get into the video. So talking about Venti, we have to go all the way back to patch 1.0 because that's essentially when he was released. The game was released with a very powerful character, and Venti was able to get the job done every single time. However, considering the job back then was a bunch of Hilichurls and Fatui agents, it was pretty easy to get the job done. In a sense, if we look at the mobs that we're fighting nowadays and you compare them to the ones we were fighting back in the day, at best, it was annoying when we look at previous Abyss iterations. And you could say, hey, a character that deals with annoying mechanics is a good character to have. However, a lot of those annoying mechanics with mobs spread all over across the room, which being incredibly difficult to reach and kill when they were all level 90 with a ton of health. But Venti was able to trivialize a lot of that, along with his usage of Viridescence, allowed for very easy and swift clearings of those type of room setups. And I would like to ask you, when was the last time Hoyoverse was reluctant enough to put a bunch of small mobs all over the place in floor 12 chamber for us to use Venti? Honestly, if you're gonna ask me, I can't even remember the last patch. I would like to think it was somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5, because that's truly when Venti started to lose traction. All right, so with the release of Ganyu in patch 1.3, a new comp was discovered, and it was called the Mogana, right? And that comp truly took the best of both worlds, the best of AoE and the best of CC. You were able to control the entire room of enemies with Venti, as well as Ganyu allowing her icicles to hit multiple enemies. Everyone that was sucked up by Venti was hit by Ganyu's burst skill, her icicle, for around like 40 something times, which ended up completely breaking the game. And I think Mihoyo knew this as well, and what ended up happening was they immediately released future patches with less CCable mobs, making it very difficult for people to trivialize all the game mechanics with just two characters. Now remember, there were other units also involved in that team, but truly at the time you could take Venti and Ganyu, slap them in Abyss, floor 12, and clear the room just by yourself like that, with a C0 Venti, by the way, and a C0 Ganyu. But with the coming patches, it was very easy to see that Mihoyo has started to pivot away from this Venti dominated meta, and I can truly say we've never looked back, because soon after Kazuha came out, which was what I honestly think dealt the finishing blow, because Venti was still being utilized, and there were many people defending Venti, saying, hey, you don't need to CC mobs with Venti. He, with Viridescence, is still able to cause an essentially death zone around his hurricane, which was very useful for that matter, right? And people were saying the ones who couldn't use Venti on mobs that were unsuckable were just bad. Right? You didn't know how to play the game properly, and you didn't know how to use characters outside of their niche, and characters were designed to be very balanced and can fit unique situations. So that's what people were saying. And then Kazuha came out, and even then I was still saying, you know, Venti still has his role in the game. Granted that Hoyoverse continues to give us mobs that we can CC and hold together, Venti will always have a role in the game. But we've never seen those mobs anymore. And if you're going to point to the overworld and say, well, Walrus, they're in the overworld, right? You can do that to the Hilichurls in the overworld. You know, you are right. Technically, you are right. So here's the question then. Are you looking to pull Venti to deal with problems you have in the overworld? Because if you are, then yes, Venti could be a great pickup. He's very efficient at doing a lot of things. Until this day, I find him to be one of the better units to choose to clear certain domains. And he sheds the time down by essentially half, and while regenerating all the energy particles for people on the team. It's amazing, right? But at the same time, you have to understand, if you're pulling a character to deal with the overworld, there are a ton of characters that can do that. And in some cases, 4 stars can also help you. Couple constellations on a good 4-star character can take you really far in the overworld. With that said, the next Abyss iteration, I'm gonna be pretty honestly copium and hopeful here that Hoyoverse is gonna start introducing smaller mobs again into the Abyss, especially with Venti being on the banner and with Ayato and Venti potentially pairing together to make some of the most insane combinations and visually satisfying combat available, right? I don't think they're gonna do both sides of the Abyss, being top half, bottom half being CCable mobs, but it's safe to assume that maybe Chamber 2, second half, it's gonna have something there, maybe, right? Chamber 1, second half, gonna have something there to give the Venti players something to suck on, all right? And that's gonna be enough for me, honestly. I've been wanting to play this character because Venti made the game so fun and so satisfying to use, but granted, it made the game a little too easy, and there's really no in-between. Whether you can suck or you cannot suck, that's literally it to Venti. If you can suck, the enemies can't move, literally dies before they land on the ground. If you can't suck, use Kazuha, use Sucrose. There are better options there, and that's just the point in the game. Like, I don't want to make the game harder for myself for no reason. And here's the catch, right, people? So then what's the verdict? Is Venti good? Is he bad? What's going on with this character? Venti essentially has become a niche character. Venti's use is to group mobs, to nuke mobs that are suckable. That's it. If you don't have a purpose for this type of character in the game right now, then I'm going to be finding it hard to recommend this character to anyone. Kazuha, while not being as good at sucking as Venti is, he still gets the job done relatively well. He's very good at what he does, and for the content that MiHoYo has been releasing, Kazuha is just a much better suit, and even Sucrose in many cases is a much better suit to what we need in the game right now. And don't get baited by Hoyoverse putting in some mobs for you to suck in the meantime over the next patch or two. Overall, the future is shaping up to be centered around bigger mobs, unsuckable mobs, which will be dominated by characters such as Kazuha, who are much more flexible in their uses, as opposed to Venti, who heavily relies on a singular function in his kit. Now, don't mean to piss you guys off by saying Venti is bad. I think he's okay. I'm not going to say he's amazing anymore. I think he's okay at this point. In the current game state, meta-wise, I'd be hard-pressed to put him at S. I'd say A tier for the current iterations of the Abyss and just general content. He's amazing in the overworld, but in Abyss, he's like B to A tier at best. Now, some people might be like, hot take, hot take, hot take. I still use my Venti to clear every single version of Abyss 12, and I get 36 stars every single time. Venti hard carries me every single iteration. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Then good for you, man. Like, if you're using Venti to carry yourself through Abyss every single iteration, congratulations. You know, you're a Giga Chad. You use this character through thick and thin, and you can truly say you are one with Venti, body and mind. You're definitely up there in the few people who have been able to achieve this. But for the vast majority of people, building a Sucrose at this point is just going to be more beneficial and overall easier to use and cheaper to build. With that being said, I still use Venti in a lot of areas outside of the Abyss. I think as long as he's outside of the Abyss, he is still SSSS tier. Even some of the more recent characters, some of the top tier characters don't rival Venti outside of the Abyss, especially when it comes to exploration, doing certain domains. He's too good outside of the Abyss. And I just want to emphasize that, right? Because Hoyoverse hasn't gone out of their way to screw Venti over outside of the Abyss, he's still really popular, and I think there's a lot of value in you picking up Venti if you're more of a casual player. However, if you're somebody who's trying to push limits in the Abyss, you're trying to find more ways to counter what Hoyoverse throws in the Abyss, Venti is not going to be as good of a pickup as someone like Kazuha. Because if you notice, even when they do put certain mobs into the Abyss, oftentimes their elemental mobs such as slimes, such as the mimics. So when Venti uses his burst, what ends up happening is you immediately infuse the element of those elemental monsters. Yeah, sometimes you can pull them together, but then what ends up happening is you create the elemental of the mobs who are being sucked, which for example, if you are sucking electro slimes and it just becomes electro, then you're shredding their electro resistance, but it doesn't matter, they're electro immune. So, you know, it's things like this that makes it a little bit more tricky to play Venti, but he can definitely still work. Alright, with that said, don't want to bum you guys down too much. Venti, still overall solid character, although a niche character nowadays. Please comment down below what you guys think. Do you agree, disagree? Am I just talking out of my ass, or am I saying what your thoughts are? Please like, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in future live streams. Until then, urge you all to stay safe and peace.